Welcome to the Polygamer podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
Today I'm chatting with a representative of a UK organization doing amazing work, that being SpecialEffect, and representing them today is Mr. Mark Saville, Communications Officer. Hello, Mark.
Hi there.
How are you today?
Very well, thank you indeed.
Excellent. So let me make sure I understand SpecialEffect correctly. You work to make video games accessible to individuals experiencing a variety of physical disabilities, whether that is a congenital birth issue or a war wound or a stroke victim or any number of such maladies, working to make the hardware of video games something that they can use to enjoy this wonderful pastime. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you probably took the words out of my mouth there. That was a great description. We basically that constitutes the core of our work. It's all about inclusion and quality of life, really. I mean, we've realised that there's so many people out there that, as the popularity of gaming has risen, that there's so many people out there who can't, join in with the rest of us and have fun like the rest of us. And we take this stuff for granted, and we just wanted to, sort of level the playing field for people who can't really join in or even play the real game of football, can't even play the video game version of football. We just want to get them included. And it's not just the, for the fun of it, really. What we're looking at is sort of matching up the right games for people's abilities as well, and also whether we can use video games maybe for rehabilitation in certain instances. So there's a wide range of things we're covering here.
Yeah, there are a variety of positive effects from playing video games. Here in the United States, we have an organization that spans the globe called Child's Play, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And they work to put video games and other toys into children's hospitals because it's been proven that it actually decreases the sensation of pain. When children have games to play, it takes their mind away from their circumstances and their environment and makes the whole situation just that much easier to endure.
Absolutely. And actually I've seen some great work with VR on that front. I think it was the University of Washington did some work a few years ago now, immersing trialing sort of people with burns victims, putting them in ice baths with VR games of the Arctic, I think it was, and that would reduce the pain as the dressings were changed.
So SpecialEffect was founded in 2008 by Dr. Mick Donegan. Can you talk a little bit about what the motivation for that founding might have been?
Yeah, I can actually. I've had the honour and the privilege to have either worked with Mick or known him for many, many years. And back then, about 7 or 8 years ago, he was working in a charity that helped people with severe disabilities to communicate. I mean, we're talking kind of Stephen Hawking type technology here, where you're using a switch or another means of the body to produce communication, artificial speech. But we were doing this within an education environment for kids. And but what was happening time after time, the parents were saying, no, this is absolutely fantastic. You've given my child a voice. You've given him independence. But what do they do when they get home at the weekend? What do they do on holidays? And it's that area of the quality of life that we're looking to improve. At the time, video games were really beginning to ramp themselves up into something huge. And Mick realized that actually this was the perfect platform in which, we could help in the best way possible.
And do you work solely with physical disabilities or also cognitive ones, such as dyslexia or color blindness?
That's a great question. I suppose the honest answer is we work with the people who ask us for help, and it's the vast overwhelming majority have been physical disabilities, although obviously there's some crossover with cognitive disability within that in many cases. For example, if we go and see somebody who's got a physical disability, it might be that we are looking at perhaps games which don't require such a fast reaction because they have a problem with their cognitive ability. But unusually, the requests for help about colour blindness have been fairly low.
And why do you think that is? Because the statistics I've seen is that a surprising number of people do experience some degree of color blindness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's, with the sort of people we're helping, the challenges they're facing are more of sort of a motor nature, I think. And so if they have a visual a problem, we'll look at that as part of the package rather than as an individual disability.
And what about age-related issues? For example, we have what some generations might call silver gamers, where as they get older, I mean, we all experience that we don't have the capacity for Twitch games that we did in our youth, but also arthritis may settle in and make it more difficult to even hold a controller. Is that something that SpecialEffect would work with?
Yeah, we've seen people of all ages really, from about 2 to 62. There was a gentleman we saw quite recently in his 60s who'd had a stroke, and he loved playing games with his nephew, and he just wanted to carry that on. So we helped him with a custom setup to just carry on that interaction he had with his nephew. And we were also contacted, I'm just trying to think back, it was about 3 or 4 months ago, by somebody who also had an accident, and he wanted to look into the possibility of using the Wii as a really positive way of rehabilitation. So all kinds of people, all walks of life and all ages. It's great.
And how do your clients find you? I can't imagine that during their checkups with their doctors, for example, they might say, Doc, I really want to be able to play video games, and then they refer them to you. So how do they go about discovering SpecialEffect?
We're finding it's mainly through the gaming community itself, actually. And if people are already avid gamers and then they lose that ability to play, then they will normally have sort of friends who will sort of check out and try and find solutions for them in channels which would probably lead to us. If it's friends and families, yes, it's a bit more difficult. And at the moment, with the word is getting out about us here through sort of the general media and the sort of the fundraising events that we're doing. So that's how they get hold of us. But in a sense, we're still quite a small team here. There's only about 12, 15 of us. So demand has absolutely gone through the roof in the last 2 or 3 years for our help. So we're just about keeping up with that at the moment.
Those 12 team members you serve, is it England or the larger UK that you serve?
It's the whole of the UK that we can actually go out and do sort of face-to-face work. That's really because what we like to do is we like to look at people's individual abilities, and every person's different. It's about creating custom setups for each challenge, each person. For example, somebody with cerebral palsy might have spasms which make it very, very difficult to use a normal controller or a normal keyboard. So we'll set up some very heavy-duty buttons and switches and joysticks in exactly the right positions where their arms or their limb movements can actually hit them, where they can be controlled. Now, that is different in every single case of cerebral palsy we see. So it's not just a case of saying, here's a setup which is perfect for people with cerebral palsy. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If it's, say, muscular dystrophy, then we're looking at sort of an area where, with the muscles weakening in the body, we're looking at very, very small movements that we've got to try and turn into switch controls, into joystick controls and buttons. And that often requires very, very careful placing of micro switches, so often down to the near, millimeters count here. If we get it wrong by 2 or 3 millimeters, the setup doesn't work. So it's very, very customized, and there's no kind of one-size-suits-all solution.
So if every patient is a case of one and these solutions can't be mass-produced, how do you go about creating the hardware that they need? Do you partner with hardware developers such as Logitech to create something?
Yeah, well, what we do, we match, we modify, we create, we get the soldering iron out, we get the drill out. There's a lot of kind of assistive technology that's already available out there off the shelf. For example, chin switches, mouth switches, all kinds of switches that cover all parts of the body. Muscle switches, for example, and we'll use adapters and link boxes through to whatever console they want to use, or whatever PC they want to use, and we'll try and match and modify exactly the equipment to suit the abilities.
So you have among those 12 team members not only communications individuals such as yourself, patient liaisons, fundraisers, but also engineers.
Yeah, actually, that's quite key. The makeup of the teams is really important for us. We have generally, if somebody asks for help and their abilities mean that they can't travel to the centre here, we'll sort of bung the equipment in the van, jump in the van, and go out to see them. And that will generally be a technical specialist, somebody who really knows their games, really knows sort of the remapping of all the different consoles and that kind of stuff, and how that can be achieved. And also and this is really, really important, we'll take an occupational therapist as well. What that does, the OTs are absolutely brilliant. They can sort of look at a person and they can make sure that their gaming experiences are comfortable, that they're safe, or that any equipment that we set up actually ties in with any existing technology they've got, like wheelchair controls, for example, or environmental controls, turning TV off and on. And it's amazing. I've been out on trips with the OTs and the guys where the OTs have very, very gently manipulated the arm of, say, somebody with spinal muscular atrophy, until there's all of a sudden a tiny, tiny movement in the little finger, occurs, and you think, bang, there we go, we can put a micro switch under there, and we've got a method of control. The guys are amazing.
So with only 12 team members serving all of the United Kingdom and each of these solutions being unique, you must have to be very careful about managing the volume of requests and how many people you can serve and accommodate in a year.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of a waiting list, and then on top of that, we get sort of questions from all around the world. People all around the world email us about sort of what equipment might be suitable for them, and whether we can sort of suggest a solution for them as well. So it's not just the UK we're dealing with; it's worldwide at the moment. And yeah, the pressure's on. But at the moment, we're looking at, I think it's about a two month waiting list, 1 or 2 months, which we think is really long. But then, of course, if you're dealing with hospital waiting lists over here, actually 2 months is nothing. People go, 2 months, hey, that's brilliant. So,
yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
So some of these modifications that you're making, the specific example I'll use is I saw on one of your videos a young girl who had lost her hands and feet, and they were able to strap a Wiimote to her arm and reduce the weight of the controller to 1/3 of its original so that she could hold it and use it in that capacity. So, and I imagine that making a Wiimote that is 1/3 of its original weight would have a much broader appeal. And so, I mean, there are certainly individuals who like their controllers to have some bulk and some heft to them, but it seems like some of these controllers could have been, by factory default, more accessible than they already are. For example, the Xbox Pro Elite controller, or whatever they're calling it, with all the different swappable buttons and programmable paddles, seems like that would be a great device to make more accessible, because you can remap all the controls, which is usually a feature found in software, and now Microsoft has moved it to the hardware. So why isn't more accessible hardware more widely available? Why isn't it more often the default?
I suppose my answer to that would be that what we're focusing on is actually using what equipment is out there and available, and then adapting it to suit. we got a few of the those Elite controllers through the other day. Beautiful they are, and even then with the paddles on the back and the remapping, they offer a lot of opportunities and options for us. And I think we've already gone out and helped a couple of people using the modified Elite controller. So essentially, I suppose what I'm saying is our role really is to help people directly with the problems they have. We don't really sort of advocate, or we go out or lobby manufacturers or the government to make equipment more accessible, because I think there are organisations who do that very well. What we would like to and do spend 100% of our time doing is just concentrating on helping people to game.
I see, because you do have on your website a remarkable list of individuals and celebrities who are in support of your organization, and I noticed names like Peter Moore and Tim Schafer on that list, who certainly have the capacity to introduce accessibility at its point of origin, as opposed to leaving it to be something that the end user has to deal with.
It's interesting. Well, there's a case in point. Where we were at an exhibition and I was demonstrating a particular, I think it was one of the racing games, and we've set up an eye control version of that where we use it where you can steer and accelerate and decelerate just by looking at the screen in various positions. And there was a guy at the back, and after a while he said, "You're using that game with your eyes?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, I was the lead designer on that game, lead programmer. I had no idea that was possible. And then we said, well, yeah, we've written this little piece of software that goes with it. But that kind of thing, opened the whole dialogue, and now we're talking to the company. I think what we're trying to do is inspire developers and the gaming industry to, realize that actually there are a lot of advantages in helping people, as many people as possible, to game. We're certainly aware that all the companies, they do have deadlines, they do have budgets, and we're not going to go and hit them over the head with an accessibility stick and say you must make your games accessible, because actually we find kind of that probably is more of a negative thing than a positive thing. If we can actually continue to do what we do, and then the companies, as many of them have done, have gone, wow, it's great what you're doing. We had no idea these people could use our games. Then that's the first step, the second step, the third step towards raising awareness. Not only, I think, at a management level, but also at the kind of the developer level, and I can see in the future, that there's going to be a knock-on effect there.
Right, because a lot of developers, they have their policies and they have their finances, and if you go up against them, they're not going to see the benefit. But, for example, on a previous episode of this podcast, the author Sherry Grainer Ray talked about her book, Gender Inclusive Game Design, about how to make games that appeal to both of the binary genders, and she did that not because it's quote-unquote the right thing to do, but because it potentially doubles manufacturers' audience. And so when developers make more accessible games, they have more people who will buy their games.
There's a brilliant example of that, actually, in FIFA. FIFA's got its 2-button mode in there, which it's probably more of a 4-button mode now, but it's fantastic because the developer who put that in, I don't think realised just what an amazing effect that has had. It has opened up that game to so many hundreds, I would say thousands of people with cerebral palsy, with all sorts of physical disabilities who can't meet the challenge of the complexity that you need to normally control that game. But in 2-button mode, it's leveled the playing field. The person you're playing against, if they're in the same mode, you can have a perfectly fair game. And it's that competitiveness, that we're bringing back, that is really invigorating people.
If I understand correctly, doesn't Bayonetta have a 1-button mode?
Right. I'm not sure. You're probably talking outside my sphere of experience there.
Okay, I'll double check that and I'll put a link in the show notes. So you provide all this service to all these individuals at no cost to them?
Absolutely. That's absolutely key. It's central to what we do. I think if you start charging or if we start charging for the help that we're giving and the loans of the setups that we're giving out as well, because once we've provided a setup, obviously we do loan the equipment to people until they're really, really sure it's the right thing. If we start charging for this, we're putting barriers in the way. We're putting a watch in the way. We're putting a wallet in the way. But we're also putting expectations about, in the way as well. People we're creating administration systems which we don't need. We're creating financial systems that we don't need. It's all taking the focus away from what we're trying to do, which is basically just to get in there and help people to game.
I can see how that's a huge benefit to the end user, but how does SpecialEffect afford to provide such a service at no cost?
It's a crazy business model. It's absolutely crazy. If you think about it, we've got specialist. We're employing sort of specialist people here. We've got vans to run. We've got loads of equipment to buy. And we don't charge a thing to do it. I mean, it's a risk. It's a huge risk. And, in the early years, like most charities, you were thinking, okay, well, let's do this from month to month and, see how we go. What has been so, wonderful, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is that the gaming community, the gaming industry has said, yeah, we understand what you're trying to do. How can we help? So many times people have said to us, I can't imagine life without games. Here, what can I do? And that's just been wonderful. It's really uplifting. And as a small charity, we genuinely appreciate any donation we get, because we realise that this money could go somewhere else. And actually, the other aspect of that is in the charging thing, is we don't want to charge the people for our help, because the people that we're seeing, with disabilities already have massive challenges in their life, and already they have massive financial challenges elsewhere to cope with other areas of their disability. The last thing they want is, yet another set of charges just to cope with a hobby, something they want to do. So we're trying to take that pressure off.
Hey, that's wonderful. When you create these hardware solutions for your clients, do you ever, very often they are unique to that particular individual, but they may serve as a template for somebody else who is searching online for some sort of relief or some sort of access to video games, and they may not necessarily be within your sphere of influence. Do you ever open source your solutions so that other people can reproduce them, maybe even like using 3D printers or something?
In terms of the actual mechanical, the actual physical devices, I don't think we've actually got that far yet. On the software side, we have we have sort of commissioned a few people to write bits of software for us. And we're always looking at making that available if people want it. A lot of the time, though, the sort of software we're writing is very, very specific to either to a particular device with a particular game, for example. So you'd have to have a specific set of disabilities and want to play that game. But in that case, yeah, that's no problem. We'll see what we can do. We're facing different challenges every week. The games are, by their very nature, they're getting harder, they're getting more challenging, and which is right. That's what should happen. But as a result, we're getting extra kind of challenges put on us to see if we can work around these issues. But it's great, and we just keep going.
There are certainly games that are getting harder, and it's easy to look at the Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Super Meat Boy as the examples of that, but there are other games that seem to actually be getting easier, like Mario games. Now, if you fail a level a certain number of times, they'll actually show you how to beat it, or the Lego games where you can play it as much as you want, and it's almost impossible to lose or die. And so when you say games are getting more difficult, are you talking about in terms of accessibility?
I think in terms of, I'm thinking in terms, I'll take a very, very bland example here in terms of just console button combinations to do very special moves, beat bosses. For example, when the new consoles were released, there was we've looked very carefully at them to see what has changed inside those, and the actual physics inside that controller, in terms of the miniaturization, was actually was more difficult to alter than the old controllers were. For example, the holes that they were sort of putting the wires in were a lot smaller, so we're having to work a lot more carefully and find ways around that.
Gotcha. I can imagine how much more difficult it is to make games accessible nowadays, because the original 8-bit Nintendo, which I started with, had your D-pad and 2 buttons, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And take a PlayStation 4 controller, you have, besides the directional input, you have at least another 12 buttons besides that. So on one hand, it's getting more complex and more difficult, but technology goes both ways. It benefits all aspects of the mission, and you have not only more complex controllers, but you have 3D printing and miniaturization and eye tracking and the like. So you have more tools at the same time with which to make games more accessible. So would you say that Special Effects' job is getting easier or harder?
It's changing. I would say it's changing, and we're finding new solutions to the way it's changing all the time. Let's take an example here. If you've got somebody with who with, say, spinal muscular atrophy, who finds it very difficult to grip a joystick. Now, you've got various off-the-shelf solutions to combat that. You can actually run a cable out, modify your console control, run it out to a big heavy-duty joystick with a modified top. But actually, we found recently that if we can use these thermoplastic beads to actually mold a very, very custom-made handset to that person's particular shape of their hand. And then we can attach that to the joystick and bang, you're off. So I think as the technology develops, so does our knowledge and our capability to develop with it.
And we've been talking primarily about console games, but the kinds of games and the way that people interact with them have also been evolving. Would you say that the advent of mobile games or motion controls like the Wii, or even VR, as you mentioned previously with the Oculus Rift, has that had an impact on how accessible games are?
That's a great question. I suppose you won't be surprised that the vast majority of games that people come to us wanting to play are things like FIFA, Call of Duty, Battlefield, the big titles.
Sure.
But when you're looking at something like VR, at the moment we're testing out the potential of eye control within a VR unit and what that would bring to the VR experience. Because VR is an experience for people with disabilities. I think if they've got severe disabilities, yes, it is fantastic because you can actually immerse yourself in the game, and there is sort of an escapism aspect to that. But what we'd like to do is introduce a bit more control into that. So we're looking at, as I say, the eye gaze option there. But in terms of mobile games, it's, again, all I can say is we're led by what people ask us to do. And if we get a whole load of people saying, there's this fantastic new version of Candy Crush or whatever comes out on mobile, we'll switch our focus and see what we can do on that front.
Yeah, because I can imagine that mobile games, motion control games, require a lot less requirement to hold a controller and press certain buttons. But at the same time, it requires a different kind of physical commitment. You have to be able to wave your hands around to play the tennis game, or with a iPhone game, you need to be able to move your finger across the screen, and that's much harder to do if you have limited movement.
Absolutely. It used to be, for example, that the Kinect in the early versions, I think I'm right in saying there were very few games that would pick people up if they were in wheelchairs. I think things are different now, but at the time that people were coming to us to say, I bought a Kinect for my son who's in a wheelchair, and none of them work. So our role then was to say, okay, well, here's some games that will work. Don't waste your money buying the others. So again, it's just yet another aspect of what we do.
And I think a lot of that comes from how extensive their testing was and what sort of demographics they were testing the devices with. If it didn't occur to them to see if the Kinect worked with people in wheelchairs, then they would be surprised by that when it hit the market, and a whole bunch of people that they didn't consider say, hey, this doesn't work for me. And that's another reason for diversity in the workplace, is because you get more perspectives before the product launches as opposed to after.
I think you're right. And one of the ways we're hoping to combat that is to really push the message out about what we're doing and more importantly, the difference it's making, the impact it's having to younger gamers. For example, we've developed a way in which you can play Minecraft just using your eyes through an eye control system, and that's gained a lot of interest and popularity in perhaps younger gamers. Now, these younger gamers are going to be the developers of the futures and the managing directors of the future. So if we can influence how they view gaming accessibility now, then it's going to stand us in good stead for the future.
Exactly. Whereas if they see video games now as being something that's not available to them, something that's not made for them, then they subconsciously or otherwise will just eliminate that entire career path from their options.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you tell me about what one of the most challenging missions you've ever had at SpecialEffect? Like a particular, like you just mentioned Minecraft being controlled by your eyes. That never would have occurred to me. And it's on some level, such a complex game that I am having difficulty fathoming how it might even work. Can you tell me about like maybe another example of when you first went in, you thought, wow, this is going to be really challenging. This is not like something we've encountered before. We're going to have to start from scratch and hope we can do something.
I think there's the OTs and the specialists could probably come up with many examples of that. I mean, the ones that I'm thinking of mainly do indeed involve the eye gaze movement. I mean, you're talking about people who've maybe had high spinal injuries, fallen off their bikes or their motorbike or diving accidents, and they're coming out with very, very limited abilities to game at all. They can only perhaps move their head or maybe their chin or even their eyes. And sometimes you are looking at people who can only move their eyes in one direction, and that becomes incredibly complex. There was one person we saw who recently called Rob, I think his videos on our YouTube channel. He was about to go to university over here, great sportsman. He was involved in a car accident and broke his spine. And his parents got in touch with us while he was still in intensive care in the hospital because after a few weeks, he was thinking, well, what can I do? That I have no independence at all. So we were able to go down there and introduce him to the concept of eye gaze. And within a few sessions, he was playing golf with his eyes. He was playing chess with his eyes, and just to see the smile on his face, just to see the smile on his parents' face, the relief that, he realized that he could actually do something for himself. Now, the other aspect of that is that, this kind of technology has much further applications just than games. Rob is, he could use the internet with it. He's gone on to start a degree Bath University, and he's using that technology to do that. So it's not just the gaming that sometimes that we're introducing here. It's actually a quality of life that goes far beyond that.
Because I imagine these input devices, although designed originally for games, in some contexts, such as computer gaming, they can probably use these to do other things like surf the web or the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a real bonus to have people here who are skilled, as I say, with drills and soldering irons, because they can turn, old controllers into amazing controllers for new uses. For example, we've got lots of people we see who can't use their thumbs properly, so joysticks are out of the question. So just by swapping around the joystick on a controller from the top to the bottom, it means that they can hold that controller on top of their knee and then move their knee around, and that produces that movement for them. They can put it on their chin. It's possibilities rather than challenges we're looking for.
Now, some physical disabilities are not limited to just the physical aspect. For example, at the top of the show, we mentioned working with war veterans, and very often they come back from war with not just the physical scars or loss of limbs, but also PTSD. Does that play a role in when you are working to accommodate them?
It does, and we've got to be especially sensitive to that. There are so many factors when we go to see somebody new that may or may not play a part in their ability to game or in our ability to help them. It's not just that. I mean, it's even more mundane. For example, I was out on a visit where our occupational therapist spent about half an hour talking to the family and the carers of the person we were helping. And the questions she was asking were like, oh, I see he's got a new pair of glasses, has he changed his prescription? Oh, I see he's got a new carer, what's the carer like? Does the carer know anything about technology? Is she interested in games? Oh, I see you've moved, what's the lighting like in your house? All these little things can play a huge part in the success of being able to game, the success of being able to really get 100% out of your games.
The SpecialEffect website has an FAQ, and one of the questions is, what if you can't help me? Mm-hmm. And the answer is that you'll work with them to point them in the right direction, get them the resources they do need. Mm-hmm. What sort of situation would arise where SpecialEffect was not able to help a person?
It depends. I think if the sort of situation might be if somebody came to us and say the parents or the family said, look, they're very physically disabled, but we want them to try games. And we went to see them. And then actually we realized that what probably would be a good first step would be to actually get used to using technology at all. Eye gaze is a great example of that, is that a lot of people, especially really young children, don't immediately pick up eye gaze. There's got to be this period of cause and effect that they go through while they realise that actually if they move their eyes, something actually happens in it because of them moving their eyes. And so that, for example, might be a case. There's often a mismatch between expectation of maybe the families and the people we see and what we can actually do as well. With the best will in the world, if somebody comes to us with a severe disability and says, I want to play every game in the world, we'll have to say, well, we'll see what we can do.
Right.
But, we'll do the best we can do, but, that might not be possible. What's been really useful is the fact that because we've got the OTs, because we've got the specialists, and because we've got the history we do of our employees from various charities in various areas of disability and AT, we have this sort of big resource of other organisations we can point to. Which might provide them with better help than we can give, or more suitable help than we can give on any particular thing.
Do you ever have to point people to the United States sort of counterpart to SpecialEffect, that being Able Gamers?
Oh yeah, we do get quite a few inquiries from the States, and many times, I've personally said, here's Able Gamers' web address. Please contact them. For the great work they're doing over there. Yeah, and it's not just the States as well. It's quite sobering that, there's so many people from so many countries asking the same question. There's nothing like this for people like us in our country. I wish there was. Can you help? And it's quite a wrench to have to write back and say, actually, I don't know of anyone in your country who does that, but we'll see what we can do from this end by email.
Yeah, that must be heartrending to have those encounters.
Yeah. And especially in cases where you're dealing with somebody with a life-limiting disease or somebody who's, because they've had their accident, their personal circumstances have really gone down. So, yeah, it is quite hard sometimes.
But let's talk about how we can help you. Special Effect has Game Blast 16 coming up later this month.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, it's basically what we do is every February now we put aside a weekend and we just ask gamers and the gaming community and industry to just do anything gaming related and maybe get sponsored for it to raise money for us. So a lot of it is gaming marathons. That's what it originally started as, and we've got way over 200 people from all around the world now. People and teams signed up to do marathons for us that weekend, which is absolutely incredible. It's jaw-dropping for us at this end. But, we've also got some big companies over here like Game and Jagex who are really pushing the boat out to help us try and reach our goal of, I think it's £150,000 we're trying to raise this year.
Wow, that is ambitious. Is that in line with what you've raised in previous years?
Yeah, first year was 50,000. Last year was 120. So we're crossing our fingers and going for the big 150.
Excellent. So that is the weekend of February 26th to the 28th. And can anybody sign up and play any game? And does it have to be on Twitch?
No, it does. It's essentially gaming at your own convenience. You can sign up and play any game you like. It doesn't have to be on Twitch, and see if you can raise some sponsorship. It's not just games either. We've got some companies doing gamer bakes for us. We've got a couple of companies doing pub quizzes on that weekend for us. So it's not just intense gaming. It's anything that you think which would be a way of having fun to raise money.
Game Blast 16 is occurring February 26th to 28th. There will be a link in the show notes for anybody who wants to sign up. Mark, is there anything about either Game Blast or Special Effect that we have overlooked in the past hour?
I think it's probably fair to say, and just a couple of things, that we started out just wanting people to include it more and wanting people to have a better quality of life. And everybody who gives to us, everybody who contributes or helps in some way, we genuinely appreciate it. It's like a big family here. That's fantastic. And the other thing to say is, every day our therapists and technicians are going out to see people who lead and face such challenges in their lives. But time after time after time again, they're so uplifting, these people. I know it sounds a bit kind of cheesy, but these are amazing, incredible people that we're seeing here. They have so many difficulties in their lives, but they meet us with a smile. They say, "Yeah, I want to do this. I don't want to just game. I want to do it competitively. I want to go online." And it's an absolute privilege helping them out.
And anybody who wants to see that for themselves only has to look at any one of your number of wonderful YouTube videos where you can see the effect that having access to video games has on these individuals, and the smiles on their faces are so authentic that you can see the difference that Special Effect is making.
That's right.
So Mark, remind us where we can find your organization online.
www.specialeffect.org.uk, and everything leads from there. You can find out more about Game Blast. You can find out more about the work we do and how we do it. And also about the ways in which you can help us do that.
Yes, and you also have an email list, and you're on Twitter as well, I believe?
Yeah, and Twitter and Facebook. And actually, what's been brilliantly recently is our Instagram account. One of our technologists who goes out and sees people, if he can get permission from the person he's seen, he will go home and immediately put a photograph and a case study straight up on Instagram. So if you have a look at the Instagram channel, that is absolutely packed full of people we've seen, and those stories happen, come online immediately after they happen.
Wonderful. Real-time reporting. The internet is fabulous. So there will be links to all these and more at polygamer.net, where this is episode number 39, and you can find more about Special Effect at their website at specialeffect.org.uk. Mark Saville, Communications Officer for Special Effect, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful learning about you and the work that you do.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Ken.
This has been Polygamer, a Gamebits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Ken. I hope I wasn't rambling too much there.
No, this was wonderful. Thank you. And in fact, I'm going to send you a link to a previous episode I did with one of the managing editors at Eurogamer.net. Are you familiar with that website?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I spoke with Mr. Christian Donnellan because he wrote this wonderful article about a year ago about how video games taught him the life skills he needed to cope with his recent diagnosis of multiple sclerosis.
Wow. Okay. That would be great to read.
Yeah, and it was a piece that hit home for me because my mother has multiple sclerosis.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
Christian and I had a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Wow. It is. It's amazing how these people just sort of accept it and then face it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when faced with these challenges, so many individuals choose to rise to the occasion, whether it's by writing articles for Eurogamer or reaching out to SpecialEffect. It's just amazing.
It's a long may it continue that we can be around to help people out in the way that we're doing.